Hello, everyone. Welcome to The Bryce is Right. I am Brycearonee, and I do my best to promote positive atheism and secular humanism. And this week, I decided to cover a topic that seems to be relevant in current events, pop culture, social media. Specifically, the topic relates to transphobia, but more broadly, the idea of cancel culture. And I'm talking about, if you guys haven't caught it yet, Dave Chappelle recently came out with a Netflix special called The Closer, which has received criticism. So we're going to be talking about that. And we're also going to be touching on the idea of political correctness, wokeness, cancel culture, kind of all that stuff as it relates to comedy and stand-up comedy. So to discuss this, I thought it was a great idea, if I didn't say so myself, to bring in the only real stand-up comedian I know and a guy who's actually been on the show in the past. He's returning with us, David C. Smalley. And actually, coming up later, I have another treat for you guys because we've got Skids the Clown and the Reverend Brother Heathen coming up from our sister show, Faith Not Included. But without further ado, let's get started. David Smalley, welcome back to The Bryce is Right. How you doing?
Man, I'm good. Thanks for having me. I had a great time last time I was on the show, and I'm looking forward to this one.
I appreciate that. I'm looking forward to it. I think a lot of other people were looking forward to it as well when they found out that I was that I was getting you back. So I appreciate that. What you been up to? What have you since our last appearance? Say I don't know, 4 or 5 months ago. I lose track of time, but
Yeah, so I've been doing comedy shows a lot more. I've done a bunch of comedy shows up and down the coast, all West Coast stuff, obviously for now. But yeah, I'm doing a lot of comedy shows, and if people want to get in touch with me, if I could just tell them real quick, there's a way they could actually text
floor is yours.
And they could text me, and they could receive updates on comedy shows. The number's 424-306-0798. 424-306-0798. All you got to do is text me there, and then a little auto response will happen. You got to click a link, and then you're on my list, and I'll let you know, discounts and secret codes and free shows and stuff like that. Also, everything's at davidcsmalley.com. I mean, I have been, God, I've lost count. I've lost count of how many shows I've done this month, but they're all on my website, davidcsmalley.com, right on the main page. Yeah, I'm just letting loose on stage, man. I'm having so much fun. I'm headlining some shows in San Diego coming up. I'm at the Laugh Factory. I'm at the Improv. I'm not the Improv, the Comedy Store, and just picking up shows all over the place. And I love being on stage. I'm of course doing the podcast. I just released an episode last night, and I've got 2 more shows planned to record this week. I'm not sure when they'll come out, but I'm melding together my podcast audience and my comedy audience, and I'm finally finding that voice on stage that takes so long to do whenever you're a stand-up comedian. So I'm having a blast. I'm getting paid to do what I love, which is hard to do in this town, and I'm very fortunate. So I appreciate all the people who are supporting me on the Patreon channel because they make it happen. So that's what I've been up to. A whole lot of stand-up comedy.
Now, I want to be clear. You did just tell the audience to text you?
Yeah. Yeah, okay. It's my phone. Yeah, literally 424-306-0798. Just text me.
There you go. From his mouth. So I won't get in trouble for this. I'm not blasting you. I'm not, what do they call it? Doxing or anything like that.
Nope.
It's straight from David. So speaking of your comedy shows, how safe is that in this day and age? And how prolific is it? Are you experiencing, are a lot of people coming? Are tickets selling? Is it sold out, or is there, like, how does that work with the social distancing and all of that?
Yeah, I've had a few shows sell out, but it's a little bit lower capacity, usually because of COVID. And like the Comedy Store, they're requiring proof of vaccination before you walk in. They're also requiring proof of vaccine for all the comedians. In fact, the last show I did there was a huge protest out front where people were screaming that the vaccine kills people and that the Comedy Store is a Nazi company. And I just went on stage and talked about them for about 10 minutes.
Yeah, I was going to say, that seems very unrelated.
Yeah. Well, it's this idea that it's so funny because, the basis of their argument is that we should all have freedoms. And then I just walk up to one and I go, should the Comedy Store have the freedom to make their own rules? They're like, well, yeah. Like, then go home. What are you doing here? Like,
there you go. Owned.
So
did you drop the mic in front of them? Or
yeah, clearly. Yeah. No, I just went on stage and vented, you know, about them, about my family who agrees with these people, and just about the whole anti-vax thing. When you say safe, since this show is about cancel culture, I don't know what you mean. Do you mean COVID safe, or do you mean safe to speak your mind up there? Because I think those are two different things right now.
Well, that's a good point. Initially, I was referring to COVID safe, but and I will ask that question later on, because I kind of built that into the show. But before I get to that, I wanted to ask you, have you seen Dave Chappelle's show?
Yeah, I have.
Okay. What'd you think? And you can, in terms of the humor, it's how funny it was compared to, because there's this argument that I hear from some people, Dave Chappelle was funnier back in the day, and now he's less funny now, and it's more, seems to be like kind of political stuff. But I don't know, is it still the same Dave Chappelle? Do you think he's just as funny, or how did you feel about it?
So first of all, I wonder how many people are going, finally, a straight white guy is weighing in on this issue. You know, I don't know that a lot of people are going to be concerned with my opinion. This is one argument straight white guys, for the most part, are just staying the hell out of, going, hey, there are two groups that are very pissed off at each other, and we're not the target for the moment. Let's just shut up and watch.
And to that end, I have two other straight white guys that I will be inviting onto the show as well.
So my God.
A panel of all straight white guys except
what are you doing, Bryce? You're going to catch more shit for that than we are for what we say. Here's the thing about Chappelle, man. Chappelle, in my opinion, his body of work has surpassed, you know, the likes of Richard Pryor and George Carlin as one of our gods of comedy. I mean, the guy has walked away from millions of dollars, came back, fought giant corporations, has been the subject of cancel culture discussions multiple times, and is knocking down $20 million a special. I mean, as far as stand-up comedians go, you can get no more successful than Dave Chappelle. Mm-hmm. He's incredibly funny. He's incredibly talented. I've met him. I've been in the same room with him a couple of times. In fact, I was in a room with him one time while he was on stage. There were like 12 of us in the room. And a guy that he was on tour with fell asleep in the back. Darnell Rawlings fell asleep, and he was snoring. And people were like, shut the fuck up, man. Like telling Darnell to shut up because he was snoring during Dave Chappelle's comedy. And Dave told everybody to leave him the hell alone. He said, that dude's tired and he worked his ass off. If his snoring's bothering you, leave. And it's that level of having his friends back that was shocking to me, because I would have been like, I don't care who it is, get him the hell out of there. Mm-hmm. But he told people if they didn't like Darnell snoring to get the hell out. The funny thing is, I know Darnell as well, or I've met him, I think twice. He wouldn't even know the story because he was asleep, right? But he had his back in that moment. And I saw a brief moment of, you know, Dave's got that loyal people he loves and cares about. Also Jeff Ross, who I know, Dave takes Jeff on some of the most amazing shows and trips, and he'll just call him and be like, get on a plane in an hour and fly to Vegas. I want you to open for my special. And Jeff's like, I didn't know you were filming anything. And Dave's like, I didn't either. And by the way, then we're going bowling at Eddie Murphy's house. So let's go. Like, Dave is just crazy, but embraces his celebrity and has a good time being alive. He just really does.
I think that makes sense if you're a comedian to embrace the celebrity. I mean,
yeah.
I feel like that's a comedian. Comedians in general are more likely to do that than some of the more staunch, you know, dramatic actors.
Yeah. But I'll say this most recent special that he did, people are, you know, if your audience is the type to hear one piece of information and go, oh, I got this guy figured out, they're about to make a huge mistake when they turn this off. But I'll say this, as much love and care and respect as I have for Dave Chappelle, my initial thought on all of this is people are paying so much attention to Dave Chappelle's views on the transgender community they forgot to notice that he didn't write jokes. Like, it just wasn't funny. Like, there were a couple of times where I went, oh, that's a good point. But I do that at open mics at coffee shops in Los Angeles. It was, as far as Dave Chappelle's specials go, it was at the very, very bottom as far as comedy writing goes. But I think that's part of, kind of judging a Picasso on its own rather than looking at the body of work of Picasso, right? I mean, clearly there are 17-year-olds who have brought home greater artwork from school than Picasso has completed, right? When you look at it just on its face. But because it carries with it everything that Picasso is, we view that higher. If that special had been done, those jokes had all been done by anyone else, I don't think it would have made it to television. I don't think you would ever seen it. There just weren't laughs per minute is something you get judged by a lot by bookers. There's several minutes with no laughter in that special. But Dave also feels attacked by a certain community, so he's also doing a special about other specials at this point. Like, his body of work is so ridiculous that it's hard to compare him to anybody else. So it was the least funny special he's ever put out. And I hope he gets back to his roots. And he said he's getting back to his roots. And we can get into my thoughts on the controversy and cancel culture and all that. But just purely on its merits of being a comedy special, I think I'm more offended that they called it comedy than I am anything else. It just wasn't funny.
Yeah, I mean, I had a similar feeling when I watched it. I was trying to watch it with an objective sense of, not because I had heard about the controversy, admittedly, before I watched the special. And so then I decided to watch it. But then I tried to say, well, you know what, that's a little bit biased. Try to have an open mind and look at it for the comedy. And I felt kind of the same way. And I don't know if you feel about this the way that I do, but it almost seemed to me that this special was intended as kind of a response to certain critics, as you mentioned, and not really intended as a comedy show. I mean, there's some comedic moments in it, but it seems to be he has a statement that he's trying to make directed at people.
It should have been a podcast.
Yeah.
It was more of a monologue of his statements. And Dave's a funny dude, so if you're just talking to him in regular life, he's gonna make you laugh. He's funny. So there are gonna be funny moments no matter what he's doing. So yeah, to me, sometimes people in corporate America, I know people are gonna be able to relate to this, where you called a meeting and this could have been an email. You got us all here in this room to make 4 points that you could have typed in 50 words or less with bullet points, and we would have all been on the same page and said, okay, cool. You didn't need to get us all into the boardroom for this. There are books that should have been a blog, right? Where clearly you've got some strong opinions, but you've only got 8 strong opinions and you stretched it into 14 chapters and somehow, greased out 212 pages when there was so much filler, and I'm sure kids have gone to school and been like, I spent 8 hours in this school, did 2.5 hours worth of work. There's so much bullshit that happens in between the learning. I'd rather be at home, get my lessons done, and then be free by 11 a.m. rather than dealing with all the bullshit that goes on and the administrative red tape and the horse shit that goes on in public school. This is along those lines. I feel like this is something that could have been a podcast, but you know what? If I had been offered $20 million to go on stage and do something like that, or just release a podcast with my opinions, I'm going to go call it a comedy special too. People need to from that perspective as well. So,
and he has the platform to be able to do that. I mean, he's Dave Chappelle, right? And so
he's earned that with his other body of work. He's earned a situation like this where he can do a special about a special, for sure.
He definitely had something to get off of his chest. And I think that he was using this opportunity to do that. I'm wondering, you talked about how successful it is, it's very popular in the news. I don't know how much money he made off, if it was $20 million or whatever the case may be, but he's certainly profiting off of it. Netflix is supporting it because they're profiting off of it. And it's generated a lot of controversy. I'm wondering, he talks several times about cancel culture in this particular special. and the implication is that he's being canceled somehow. Is that consistent with the facts? When you listen to what he says about the potential of him being canceled or people trying to cancel him, and then you see Netflix fully supporting him and him making millions of dollars, and it's probably the number one thing on Netflix right now. Is he being canceled?
No, and I don't think he said he is being. I said I think he said people are trying. So
People are trying.
yeah, and I think, look, let me just clear about something real quick, just in case people are curious about and I hope I'm not jumping ahead to your
no,
question.
Go ahead.
To answer your question, no, he's clearly not being canceled. Dave's also an old guy, right? So he comes from a bit of a generation right before me, where he's like, he's saying like, I'm being canceled to him is the same thing as someone attempting to cancel him. So he's not, an activist podcaster. He's never been at, like I've been to demonstrations standing up on behalf of, the trans community to use the bathroom that they identify with. I've done sit-ins at city councils, and I've done marches at, LGBT rallies in Rowlett, Texas, and Rockwall, Texas, and gay pride stuff. And I've had tons of stuff on my show to support the LGBTQ community. Dave has never been in that world, right? So I don't think he really knows the difference between being canceled and attempting to be canceled. I just think for him, it's just, you know what I mean? It's just one solid, like when a generic Christian who's never talked with atheists goes, you have no morality, or why are there still monkeys? You just kind of look at him and go, you're not in this world enough to ask that. Like, you're clearly not ready for this conversation, right? So Dave just doesn't. I just don't think Dave really realizes the difference, or he hasn't cared to think about the difference. But I do want to say, before we get too deeply into this, that if I could make a couple of points to clarify. I think Dave, if you take out what he said and write them down, things he said are problematic.
Yes.
Period.
I know this because I've done exactly that. I had a conversation with someone, but I had to watch the special, and I was kind of transcribing what he was saying just so that I could read it back to the person. I was like, ooh. Like
when he made the statement that he should have told that mother her daughter was a dude. Okay. There are things that as comedians we say on stage that we would never really do in real life. We would never really say. I say things on stage, really offensive things, that if just that thing out of context, you'd be like, if you applied that to real life, we would go, you're the problem for attempting to apply obvious bullshit comedy into real life. Like, nobody should ever attempt to do that. But it's the same thing that like a lot of rappers got into in the 90s, right? In the early 2000s, like Ice-T, he had albums pulled down called Cop Killer because people were afraid that someone would listen to that and then go kill a cop. I mean,
right.
You're going to blame Ice-T for that. That's the problem. However, this idea that transphobia in the world leads to trans violence is very real. And if we continue to normalize that it's okay to marginalize trans people, then it only further justifies in some of these people's minds to continue the abuse and violence against trans people. And so that's a problem in itself. So what he did and said could be used by terrible people to justify their actions. But that's not to say that if Dave had not said those things, those people would somehow not be transphobic, right? I don't think Dave Chappelle is responsible for generating new transphobic people. But he could be, on one hand, somewhat playing into the overall generalization that it's okay to continue to marginalize and beat up, people. He would never say physically harm them or whatever, right?
Right.
But at the same time, it wasn't so much. I want to say this right because it's important that I get this out. It wasn't so much anti-trans, and I know that if you're a trans person, what he said may hurt you, but it wasn't so much that he was attempting to be anti-trans as it was he was attempting to shine a light on misdirected outrage, right? So his statement that you can shoot a black person in a Walmart and keep your career, but you better not hurt a gay person's feelings.
Mm-hmm.
People hear that and go, oh, I'm gay, he offended me, or I'm trans, he offended me, fuck Dave Chappelle. He's trying to shine a light on a bigger issue of the racist culture in the country. That look how angry people get for words that you say versus how many people are ignored who have literally killed black men in the street.
Yeah, I feel like he did that a few times in that
Yeah.
special, but I think maybe a counter argument someone might throw out there is that it seems like a whataboutism, and it seems like an inappropriate whataboutism because he's comparing the trans community to the black community as though look at how horrible the things that we've had to face as black people. Look at what we go through. Look at how long we've been going through it. And nobody cares about that. But now all of a sudden you say something about trans people. It's not fair, damn it. What are black people? Like, I feel like that's the point that he's trying to make, but it's not a competition.
Right.
You know?
It shouldn't be the oppression Olympics, right? It shouldn't be I have it worse than you, so I'm going to invalidate your struggles. Ideally, it would be better if people were coming together, but that's not what comedy is, right? I mean, I would never say something in a conversation one-on-one that I would say on stage as a performance. And some people may hear that and go, oh, so you're going to hide behind it and use, you know, you become racist, or you become misogynist, or you become, in fact, and this is where I would split from Dave, is that when I'm on stage and I say something that could be taken out of context as misogynist or racist or whatever it may be, I'm precisely making fun of people who actually hold those views, right? So it's a mockery of the viewpoint, and it's clear to most intelligent people that that's
just as funny, if not funnier, to me.
Right. But what Dave did is Dave was like, these are my real views. It wasn't a joke when he said I'm Team Turf, right?
So when you said a moment ago, like when you went on stage and you would say something that could be taken out of context, was he taken out of context, or were people taking it in the context that he intended it?
That's a great question. I think a little bit of both happened. For example, the joke he said, one of the funny things I think he said, and this is, people are going to be upset with me probably for thinking this is funny, but objectively, this is it's a well-written joke. When he said Caitlyn Jenner won Woman of the Year and she ain't never even had a period. I get that upsets people, but it's a well-written joke, right? I can think as a father to a 17-year-old who has had a lot of struggles as a woman, whether it be period, birth control, being hit on by 40, 50-year-old men, being constantly worried about sexual assault. 1 in 3 women are sexually assaulted during their life. Not being able to park in certain places, having to find a light, holding her keys a certain way, walking from the grocery store. Women from a very early age go through a lot of struggles, and I've watched it, not only being raised by 2 women, but raising a young woman myself. I've seen that the struggle of being a woman starts at a very, very young age. And so there is some truth to this idea, or some merit to the idea, that Caitlyn transitions and 1 year after being a woman wins Woman of the Year. And it's a topic that could be joked about. I think it could be joked about. I think it's
helpful. I think it's helpful also, considering who the person is. Caitlyn Jenner, not exactly the most the greatest person in the world.
Right.
Obviously a huge celebrity already, rich, famous, you know.
Already actually killed someone, by the way.
Yeah.
Negligently driving.
People forget about that.
Yeah, I know. Literally killed someone. And got out of it because of money, you know.
So putting the trans thing aside, Caitlyn Jenner might be considered a horrible person to us average people, just on its face, you know. But then you add in the celebrity on that, rich, famous, you know, and then, oh, by the way, transitioned and then gets Woman of the Year. I think all of that piled on top makes it kind of a more palatable joke than if it had been just an ordinary trans person who.
Right. So, but I've seen that joke peeled out and on a video, you know, with a backdrop of trans violence or some struggling or a sad person, right, with piano music playing, and then Dave Chappelle's words like it's been ripped out of a newspaper, that's out of context. That misses so much of the point. It's not to say he didn't say some harmful things or say some things that are that are going to hurt someone's feelings. But Dave's response to all of this is, it's only problematic when it bothers you, right? If I go on stage and as a comedian, I see this happen all the time, right? Where it's very rarely, and matter of fact, I can honestly say in almost 6 years of doing this, I've never had someone come up to me after a show offended by a joke that I made about a group that they are in. It's always someone being offended on behalf of someone else that's upset. So I've never done what Dave has done. Like Dave, the actual trans community or a portion of the trans community is upset with Dave for shit he said about trans people, right?
I don't think it's just the trans community, by the way. I think it's people, because I have to say, I'm not trans. I do identify as LGBT. I found his words offensive. I know a lot of straight people who said that they were offensive and they were offended on behalf of too. So I don't think it's just, I think it's being presented as the trans community doesn't like Dave Chappelle, but I think it's a lot of people, a lot of progressives, a lot of leftists, if you will, a lot of
but here's the thing,
LGBT allies, all that.
Here's the thing. I offend people on my show. I've heard from hundreds of Christians just in the last year who say that I'm sending people to hell, I'm ruining people's souls, I should be canceled, I should be deleted, I should be killed. Like there are Christians who think they should have the legal right to take my child because not taking them to church is child abuse. They're entitled to that. There's
atheists who think taking them to church is child abuse. So,
right.
Yeah.
So my point is, Netflix is a company. They're allowed to put this content out. Mm-hmm. Dave's allowed to have his views. You're allowed to not like his views, and then you can either just say, well, they did a thing I don't like and I'm going to move on. You can cancel your Netflix subscription, or you could write your own comedy. You could start your own thing. You could have your own podcast. We have that level of freedom in this country. And the unfortunate thing is that, if I could be with you every step of the way, I could be at your rallies, I could sit in with you, I could do demonstrations, I could be an activist for you, I could be an ally, I could do whatever I can for 7 years in a row. And the problem with this outrage is the moment I disagree with something that you are passionate about, now I'm your enemy. And I really wish we would stop that, because with turf situation, now you have two groups that are on the progressive side and they're just eating their own tail, right? And that's problematic, because what you're going to end up doing is you're just going to keep dividing your group with this seeking the perfect activist, the perfect representative of your viewpoint, until the point that your group isn't big enough to be effective at any real change. So while you don't want to compromise your humanity, and I understand that, I think on some level, you have to understand that it's okay that people disagree, and we can fight about that. And that's the beauty of platforms like this. We can come on a show like this, we can have these discussions, but that doesn't mean we have to hate each other. And on some level, I will cut that off. On some level, I'll stop talking to you, but everybody's got their own limits. So Netflix is allowed to do this. Dave is allowed to do that. And people are allowed to boycott Netflix if they so choose. I feel like canceling comedians or deleting their specials because people are offended sets a very bad precedent for stand-up comedy moving forward. So I say get pissed off if it pisses you off, but if Netflix were to pull that, now that changes the entire dynamic, and we end up in a slippery slope where any comedian that gets enough complaints by any group could now be deleted. And now we start to infringe on this idea of free expression within the art space, right? It doesn't mean I get it. It's not a violation of free speech because it's taken down. I don't need to be told that. It's just a slippery slope when outrage can have a comedian deleted. That's going to be stand-up comedy is like one of the last bastions of being able to express yourself. and have the right to offend people. And I have the right to offend you, and you have the right to be offended, and you have the right to tell me to go fuck myself. And that's one of the few things that is good about this country. And I don't want to lose that with the idea that anyone who offends you can get enough complaints and then you're deleted. That's problematic for comedy moving forward.
It's an important conversation, and I appreciate you expressing all of that. I also appreciate the people in the chat right now, and I just want to take a moment to acknowledge you. We've got Bible Burner, John Christian, Tobin Templeman, so a bunch of regular names. KCA Randy, we have Black Female Atheist, Wes Sertivan, of course, producer in the background. Who else? We've got Cosmic Slice. That is a new one. I appreciate you watching the show, Cosmic Slice. Hopefully you're not actually new, and maybe just I'm having a memory lapse. But welcome to the show.
I've seen that name somewhere on my stuff, so maybe they came from one of my posts.
That makes sense. Good crossover appeal. I like it.
Probably a patron, I think.
We got Red Stick Atheist. What's going on? I can't pronounce that. JEISC54. Welcome. There's Aunt Kathy. Always a pleasure. Pasta Mike. What's going on, bud? Titan Uranus. Cool.
Half of these names are offensive, and I'd like to cancel them.
And we also have Laughing in Disbelief. Okay, so but we have a couple of other names just that we definitely don't want to cancel them. Fellow comedians of yours, so to speak, and fellow Tang members of mine. I'm going to bring in Skids the Clown from Faith Not Included, and also Reverend Brother Heathen from Faith Not Included. Welcome, guys.
Yes.
You're muted, Skids.
Yes. Oh, yes. I can't believe we're here in the same room as Mr. David C. Smalley. This is amazing. Hold on. Wait.
Why do you get to talk first? Just because I was muted?
Because that's what I do, Skids. And you're supposed to rein me in. But I got a gift because we're so thankful, guys. We really Mr. David C. Smalley, I made you a card for you. This is for me.
Wow.
I really appreciate this.
Thank you. That's beautiful. Thank you, man.
I have to say, David, he has been excited about this opportunity ever since I first announced that you were going to be on the show.
And Bryce, I made you one too. Thank you for having us on, Bryce. Jimmy.
Absolutely.
Thank you. I really appreciate this. Thank you so much, Bryce. We really appreciate it.
Did you make me a card?
Yeah, I made you a fucking card. Look at it. Fuck you, Skids. You fucking needy little baby.
There's
Jesus
no need
Christ,
for
you're
that.
embarrassing me in front of Mr. David C. Smalley. I appreciate this, Skids.
I don't know if that was the thing to do. We're trying to have a very serious conversation.
Oh, okay. All right. Yes.
Where were you guys? I thought you were talking about cancel culture and comedy.
We were. And actually, the question I wanted to ask, it's a question for both of you. I'll start with David, but I'm kind of curious. How would you define cancel culture? Because we talked about the problem that Dave Chappelle was having, where he was using this term and using the word canceling, but possibly using it in a different way from what canceling actually means. So what is cancel culture, and what does it mean to be canceled?
I think cancel culture is actually a derogatory term to keep it at bay. Someone like Kevin Spacey being canceled made sense. There were actual sexual assaults confirmed, right? And rightfully so, people would not want to continue working with someone who has a history doing that.
And I think if I could make a quick correction to that, I think, wasn't that reversed? I think the guy who made the accusation came out later and said that he either didn't press charges or didn't go forward with it. And I think he was legal at the time. I thought I heard that was not what it.
Not that it was legal.
Initially,
it wasn't that it was legal. It was that it was non-consensual.
Right,
so
but then
I didn't hear that. I didn't hear that he walked
that back, but I could be mistaken.
Okay, then that would be news to me. I guess in my head, that was an idea of one that
certainly at the time when those accusations came out, it was legitimately, we cannot. And I look at that as companies protecting themselves, even if it's people are innocent until proven guilty, but you also have the court of public opinion. And if you've got a guy who's accused of something and he's the star of the show and representing your platform, and your platform could be dragged through the mud, you have the right to say, yeah, we don't want to be dragged through the mud, figure your shit out.
But I think calling it a culture is a derogatory term on purpose to keep it at bay and to limit its power, because there are going to be people who deserve to be removed from positions, period. Most of them happen to be cops. But if there are people who are going to be removed from positions, they need to be removed because of their behaviors and because of their danger to future people. You can't, if you just don't like what I say, you have no merit to cancel me. And when you attempt to, I think that's when it gets called cancel culture. Like you're trying to create the culture in which you can cancel me for disagreeing with you. And that's horseshit. You don't get to delete me because you don't like me. If I'm a danger to future people, then fine. And that's the argument, I think the strongest argument that people have against Dave Chappelle right now, is that some of the words he said could potentially be dangerous to furthering or perpetuating violence against trans women and men. And maybe they have some argument there that we could talk about. But I think that's why they call it a culture, because we want to limit its power. We only want people to be removed who actually really pose a danger and should be removed. We don't want to do it just to start controlling people's speech.
I don't know if necessarily using the word culture is a derogative, just because the point is that as a culture or as a community, people have the power to do this. So cancel culture is more of a social movement where we don't necessarily have the power to remove a comedian from Netflix or a coach from the NFL or something like that. You know, these are all good examples of people who have been canceled. But that's the thing, is through social pressure, through just letting your voices be heard, Netflix or the NFL knows, hey, we possibly are going to lose business because these people are not happy with this current situation. So it's in our best interest to remove this person. So I don't know if it's derogatory. Whether it's right is another question, but I think it just suggests the powers within the people themselves.
If we could put that comment back up that just came up, if that's possible. Someone just, that right there. I want to dissect this for just a moment, but before the Reverend has his say, if it's okay. Yeah. This is interesting. Cancel culture is a poorly named term that means not putting up with bigotry. But I'll say that, like you mentioned, Skids, you mentioned the NFL coach. There was a coach recently who was recorded or filmed or photographed with like this 20-year-old girl grinding on him, right? And he's an elderly man and he's married, or he's in his 60s, I guess, and he's married, and there's this young girl grinding on him, and he's married. Okay, inappropriate? Sure, but should he lose his job over that? Like, that's where I start pissing people off, because I'm going, what if his wife is with that? What if him and his wife are in an open relationship, and this woman who's 20 years old it likes flirting with an older man who's buying her drinks all night, and they're all consenting adults? Should this man lose his job because he was photographed for doing that? To me, attempting to have someone fired for that, just that alone, is cancel culture. He's not posing a real danger to people, but you're attempting to fire him because you don't like his behavior. We need to draw a line between someone being actually dangerous to society and needing to be removed from their job versus them just being a shit person and we don't want them to make money. That's where, to me, it gets a little blurry.
Yeah, and in that example that you just gave, that was actually not really about bigotry at all. It was about arguably despicable behavior by an individual towards another one, but not necessarily references to a group of people or treatment about a community. Exactly. So in that case, I would say that definition is a little bit limited, but that's why I called this. Reverend Brother Heathen, want to expand on that, or how do you?
Yeah,
see
well,
cancel culture?
what I think is interesting is how they've relabeled this shit. Listen, like, who's the biggest whiners about the cancel culture and who's labeled it? It's all these conservative right wingers. But who are the original cancel culture? It's those fuckers. I'm sorry. They've been trying to cancel everything since the fucking 50s. Look at the McCarthyism.
Yeah.
Look at how they tried with Vietnam. Look what they did in the fucking 80s. Look at, the Smothers Brothers. They had a successful TV show, and they got canceled because they were anti-war. All right? When you lose your fucking job because you're trying to promote peace, that's pretty sad. That's awful. So
Yeah.
the whole point is they're trying to paint this picture of like, we're becoming more fucking evolved. I'm sorry. And this whole thing with Dave Chappelle, like, I couldn't even get to that joke about the trans thing because the whole rape joke was just like, it turned my stomach. And you know what I did? I turned it off. Did I go on Facebook and bitch about it? No. I got offended. Something offended me. Guess what? I fucking walked away. No big deal. Because we're allowed to be offended about shit. Everyone has lines in their fucking sayings that they get offended about. But these fuckers are always trying to cancel us.
This looks like it's something out of Shane the Skeptic's dictionary. Cancel culture is the custom of calling for the removal of content and opportunity for content creators as a response to being offended by their content.
So I want to play devil's advocate for a moment.
Okay.
Because that comment and what the Reverend just said both hinted on a form of cancel culture, but specifically the trans activists who are concerned about Dave Chappelle's comments have cited, because of violence against trans men and women, that some of these words stand to perpetuate or normalize that violence against them. So yeah, it's fine for you, Reverend, to say it's bullshit, they're trying to cancel, because you're not negatively affected by that war, right? People
I'm not saying that.
I'm not saying that at all. No. I'm saying, I know, I'm just, again, devil's advocate, that you're not a soldier coming home from war that's going to be spit on or have things thrown at you. And it's not just that we don't like. I want to be clear that some people should be removed, right? And I have an idea of one I can tell you in a moment, of someone that I think I'm concerned that Comedy Central has something out right now that makes me wonder why they're able to make money on it. But that's I can talk about that in a moment. But just for devil's advocate purposes, what do you say to those trans people who say, but Dave Chappelle's words can continue to fuel the overall sociological concept that trans people can be mocked and trolled and made fun of and are less than human, because as long as you continue to dehumanize them, they might still face violence, especially in the year 2021, where it's on pace to be the deadliest year of all for trans men and women.
Yeah. They're absolutely right. They're absolutely right. And this is the whole thing with, it's not my fight, but I try to be an ally to marginalized people. And in comedy, this is what's so frustrating. And which is, you know what's more offensive to me? That Dave Chappelle, this rich motherfucker, is telling us how to live lives. Like, there's so many fucking assholes out there to make fun of. You don't need to punch down. So I am a friend, and that's the way my thinking is. And this is what I've tried to teach my children. If you don't know a subject, then go talk to people that are in a marginalized community. If you don't think black people, people of color, are being like systematically racist with the cops, then go talk to any of them. From one of my experiences, all of them have had horrible experiences. Fucking across the board. And I was 14 when I knew that shit. There's no excuses for this shit anymore.
There's
time. There's time.
There's
fucking sick of it.
That I like to say, because comedy and satire is meant to ridicule power. So when it becomes that you're ridiculing and making fun of people who are hurting, who are marginalized, who are at the bottom of the rung, it's no longer comedy. It's just bullying.
Fucking right, Skids.
Thank you.
Fucking right.
And that's the thing. I like how Jimmy said there are plenty of people you can make fun of right now. And
going after
a group that actually, like you said, this is one of the most marginalized groups out there.
Okay, so if I could, I'll play devil's advocate the other way now, because one of Dave's arguments is that this trans woman comedian that he gave an opportunity, which any of us would have, just absolutely killed for, doing comedy 3 times and then getting to open for Dave Chappelle is just beyond unheard of.
Mm-hmm.
He has said he gave an opportunity to this trans woman, so clearly he doesn't hate trans women. Now I know that the trans activist from Netflix said,
he's got a trans friend.
I have a trans friend story. I feel like it's a little more than just I have a trans friend. He literally gave a transgender comedian the opportunity to open for him for 45 minutes, which is a massive opportunity. And then he follows that with her suicide, although we don't have direct proof, but her suicide followed, I believe, several weeks in a row of trans people on Twitter, or at least online, saying terrible things to her or bullying her for some things that she had said. So what do you feel about Dave's argument there that he provided an opportunity for this trans woman's career, and it was the online LGBT community that bullied her to the point that very likely was a major player in her suicide?
There's a lot of caca here.
I will say that I did hear that part of the. Well, I watched the whole special, and I think that's towards the end of it where he kind of is about to close, where he starts talking about this person, and then it's revealed at the end that she committed suicide, and it's a sad story. And I feel like that particular story was strategically placed in the show to kind of elicit some form of getting people on Dave Chappelle's side and making them realize that he's not transphobic. I feel like that's why he put that there. I will say that I certainly respect individuals who help other individuals and who give them a chance, regardless of what their race, gender identity, anything like that. If somebody needs help and you help them, I respect that. I do not think that is necessarily a statement on how you feel about the community as a whole. And I feel like it's possible to have sympathy or empathy for individuals in a community and go out of your way to help them, but still have feelings about the community at large that are not necessarily viewing them as equal, so to speak. So on the one hand, I appreciate what Dave Chappelle did. Assuming the story is true, like you said, we don't have evidence, but I'm going to take it at face value and assume that he really did have this trans person who he gave this opportunity to, and it ended tragically. And this idea that the online LGBT community wasn't friendly to them, well, shame on them. Shame on the online LGBTQ community. But that doesn't do anything to well, the thing don't make it right. So
the one thing the one thing it could do is it could point out that a celebrity having an opinion is not near as impactful as actual behaviors online, right?
It's true.
So him just having a thought or an idea and a single setup and punchline that is not friendly to this community will not have the same impact, no matter how big he is, than actual bullying online for who someone is. And that Dave Chappelle, we have no evidence that Dave Chappelle has ever participated in that, that he's gone after people or, harassed someone to the point of suicide or any of that. So it's an important point, I think, to bring up. I think that's the piece that it brings up. Like, is what he said, as bad as it may be, should that be the topic of conversation? Or is there something else that the community at large does to their own people that should be addressed because it's going to have a bigger impact in someone's life?
Yeah, because cancel culture, I mean, we hear about it when it affects celebrities, because there's plenty of celebrities that have been affected, and that's what makes MSN's homepage, because these are people everybody knows. But cancel culture can affect, people that nobody's even heard of. And there they don't have like the huge online community of not only support and stuff like that. It's one of those things that if it becomes bullying as an online thing, then yeah, it is not just a exertion of, hey, this is the people's will. We don't want to see this person making money off of what they're saying. This is literally bullying. And then at that point, is it cancel culture anymore, or is it just straight out bullying?
Well, we've been talking about cancel culture, but I definitely don't want to be canceled. So I want to take this opportunity to bring in my producer, Wes, who is really kind of...
Hey, I know this guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know.
We
It's really nice.
that.
You come on this show, and then you come over to my show on Thursdays. You're a hard worker. I really appreciate all the hard work you do.
You better not have fucking said anything about me again. So he's talking shit about me. I don't like it.
I always
secret.
I always wondered what Kenny grew up to do.
Yes. My mind's blown.
Pretty much.
All this time working, I didn't even realize the pieces all fit now. Fuck.
I have to thank Wes for putting together a new opening. This is the first time we've used the new longer opening. David C. Smalley, you are part of a Hallmark episode, because we have a brand new opening, and we did our new countdown, and Wes put a lot of the stuff together. So he's our man behind the magic backstage. So thanks again, Wes.
Good.
Okay, cool. So the comments have been pretty active. I highlighted one a little while ago. Let me see if I can find it again. It was from Pasta Mike, and he wanted to know, where do we draw the line? And this could apply within comedy specifically, but just in general as well. What is the standard for poor behavior that absolutely should not be tolerated and should be canceled? And you were talking a little bit about that earlier. Go ahead. Let me start with Reverend Brother Heathen, because he's about to jump out of his chair. Go ahead.
Yeah, just fucking don't promote violence against other people, and don't if you're thinking about a word to use. Okay, here's a good guideline. Thinking about a word, has that word been used to marginalize people, a group of people? If it has, then get rid of it. Are you doing something that's been offensive in the past? Get rid of it. You know what? If you're not quite sure, go talk to people in that group and get their input. And then maybe you'll understand. Because it's really not that fucking hard, people. We're just becoming a little bit more sensitive to each other and understanding we've all got this fucking path to go on this planet, and there's no God fucking saving us. So we all got to get together and get along.
You're really making me have to go back and do some editing in this episode. That was at least 10 or 12 F-bombs. So
you haven't seen our show.
You're gonna
have to bleep out all of this stuff
for the potty language. I'm sorry. Put it on me. I always getting canceled.
How about you, David? Where do we draw the line?
So my wish for this entire concept would be that we just make the punishment fit the crime. And that's going to be nearly impossible to do. And when I say that, there is a smaller comedian who I won't name because we're in some similar circles, who has a special on Comedy Central right now. And he picks on a single person, and he names the woman that he's picking on, and he mocks her for having a disability. And he says that she smells bad, and he says she's annoying, and he just picks on her, and literally first and last name. And even as a comic who is anti-cancel culture and all of this, I'm like,
well, that's just straight up bullying.
I know. I'm like, Comedy Central, how in the hell are you allowing this to, I can't imagine that being my daughter, right? And someone bullying her and calling her out first and last name and mocking her disability and laughing at her and calling her smelly. And then Comedy Central making money on this. I'm shocked that that's allowed. I think if Dave would have done that on this bigger, I think we would see more of an outrage, actually. Mm-hmm. But he didn't pick on one specific person or whatever. And on the other hand, and this may divide the audience or make them a little pissed off at me, fine. Text me. You can put the number back up. Shoot me a text.
Yes. I'm going to text you all the time.
I'm thank you. Leave that up for this controversial part. When I think about the punishment fitting the crime, I think back to Louis C.K. Louis, roughly 10 years before this, of course, was a headlining comic. He was on the road. He had women and men who were featuring and opening for him and hosting for him. And there's like this hierarchy, right? Of like the headliner has the power in some instances and can make or break your career, and some not really break your career, but could definitely help boost you if they take you on the road, right? We all want to be like Jamie Kennedy grabbed me one day and was like, bro, I want you to tour with me. You're hilarious. And that was literally the week everything shut down for COVID. We were about to tour together. You always want a bigger comedian to snatch you up and take you on the road. And Louis was, masturbating in front of these women, and he was asking them, can I do this in front of you? And they would say yes. And then he would do it. And 10 years went by. We don't know how many times it happened. 10 years go by, and then it comes out that he did this. And then he immediately released this huge apology, and he acknowledged his privilege. He acknowledged his power. He said it was stupid. I haven't done it in a long time. I thought I was asking for consent. Now looking back on it, I realize that I had a position of power because I was a headliner. It was inappropriate. I shouldn't have done it. I deeply apologize. I don't think that Louis C.K. was predatory at that moment, right? I wouldn't have been worried to get a comedy show with my daughter if Louis C.K. was in the building. Like, I don't think he's a danger. I think he was turned on by this idea. He had a certain fantasy, and he leveraged his privilege and power to get that, and realized it was wrong, apologized for it, and came clean about everything. And he lost literally everything. All of his comedy specials were pulled. His TV show was pulled. He was working on a cartoon that was in development that was pulled, and his movie canceled. And we haven't heard much from him in several years. I look at that and I go, what he did was wrong. Look at me. It was wrong. That's what he said too. He was wrong and he apologized. I don't feel like that's a situation where Louis C.K. was now a danger to women in comedy. If anything, he would have been the guy to be around, because there's no way in hell he was going to be doing that stupid shit anymore. So, sorry, that's another mark for you to go do, Bryce. But I guess
no, that's okay.
I guess my point is that I feel like he was overly punished and lost everything for it. And there are some people who get away with far worse and keep their jobs. And so we just seem to be really inconsistent. It's like a little bit like our judicial system, right? You'll have someone kill someone and get 3 years because they plead out to involuntary manslaughter. And then you have someone else sell some weed and get 26 years. It's stupid, right? And it seems to be all over the place. And that's what I hope we wrap up is I would like the punishment to fit the crime.
Do you recall ever saying anything either to someone or online or during one of your comedy shows that you thought was funny or a joke and then regretted after the fact? Have you ever went back on some material that you had included and then realized not quite kosher?
Yeah.
Let me pull that out.
Yeah. It wasn't a joke that I wrote. It was, I had written some stuff, and then a guy was being a heckler and he was pissing me off during the show. And I popped something off to him that was simultaneously an insult to him and a callback to a previous joke. So on one hand, it was a little bit brilliant and I was proud of it. But going back, I was like, if that had been on a bigger stage, that probably would have been a problem. And I probably shouldn't have said that. But he laughed and everyone else laughed and no one said a word to me after. Just my own conscience was like, I don't know. In that moment, I probably should have done that. So I can see how a comedian can be on stage in the middle of a performance and pop something off and then later go, oh, maybe that wasn't the best thing to say. So
we have reached the hour. I do want to ask one more question to just kind of wrap up the idea, and relating back to Dave Chappelle and the whole transphobia controversy. What do you think Dave Chappelle should do now going forward? And how do we get beyond this? Because he's talked about it. He's gotten criticized for it. He talked about it again, got criticized for it. And now he's done a show talking about the people criticizing him for talking about it. So does he still stay on his I mean, he obviously has beliefs that people disagree with about transgender people. What should happen now? Does he need to have a conversation, or I don't know?
Well, who am I in this scenario? Am I his publicist?
Sure.
You know, if I'm his publicist and I'm advising Dave Chappelle, I'm going to say lay low, write comedy for the next 10 months, come out in 2023 with a special and demand $35 million for it, because everybody's going to be on the edge of their seats. And you know, when some sort of controversy happens or some sort of plane crash happens, they talk about it for so long. When someone goes, that was 2 years ago, you're like, what? 2 years? It's already been 2 years since that thing happened. You know, I do this when I release a podcast. I don't promote it immediately, because the second I release it, there are thousands of people who get the download and the notification, right? So I'm going to get that initial bump anyway. Why would I go promote it? There's going to be an initial bump. Then I wait a couple of days when the downloads go down, and then I do a promotion, and then it pushes it back up, right? Dave Chappelle right now is being talked about as though his special came out this morning. You know, poor Theo Vaughn just released a special. Everybody's still talking about Dave Chappelle. Go watch Theo. By the way, Theo Vaughn is one of the nicest guys. I haven't seen his new special yet. He's such a nice guy. He's one of the nicest guys I've ever met in my life. Go support him. Go watch his comedy. If he says anything terrible in there, I hate him, but I love him right now. But go watch his special on Netflix. My point is, Dave Chappelle is trending, and he's still trending. He doesn't need to do anything. His name is in the news. His name is being talked about on podcasts all over the country, all over the world. He doesn't need to do anything but go back and write. And when he comes out of the hole, he's going to be able to write his own checks and be funny again. And people have a way of forgiving this type of stuff when enough time goes by. And that's part of the argument from these activists, is that you're allowing him to do it. But he said in the special, it was his last one for a long time, and he's done talking about this topic, because he's starting to get typecast now as the anti-trans comedian, right? Yeah. Starting when he, like, you know, threw his microphone on the stage as though someone put their dick out on a conference table. He started with that, and it's been 2 or 3 specials in a row where he's addressed this type of thing. So if I were his publicist, I say, lay low for 10 months, do nothing but write, perform little spots here and there in LA, which he does all the time. He'll pop into the Comedy Store for 20 minutes and just take someone else's spot. And then put out another special in a year, do a tour, and don't even mention this stuff. That's
why do you think he keeps going back to this? Why do you think this is his issue, his go-to group to attack, if you will, or to talk about?
Because they go pretty hard at him, I think. And I think he feels like he's fighting back. He doesn't feel like he's punching down. And,
do you think they started it or he started it?
No, he definitely started it. But he doesn't like the idea of punching down. And he said this in the special because he's a member of a minority group that has been marginalized and killed by police at statistical rates that are astronomical. And he doesn't feel like, I don't know if he doesn't feel like it's possible for him to punch down. So Reverend, while you and I may look at him as this rich guy with all this privilege, he lives his everyday life as a black man in America, typically rural Ohio, right? So he has a different view of himself. And so he doesn't like the idea that he can punch down to anyone when he feels like he's, you know, a member of a group that's only 13% of the population that used to be enslaved in this country. So he feels like he's in a fight with someone else fighting for rights that he admitted he's jealous of because they've made better progress than the black community for civil rights.
And so I will say, just to expand on that a little bit, I'm reminded of a joke that Chris Rock once said during one of his stand-up performances, where he looks out into the audience that I guess is mostly white at the time, and he's like, "There's not a white person in this room that would trade places with my black ass, and I'm rich, you know."
Yep.
And so, just from the perspective, I guess, of a minority comedian, a black comedian in particular, who has lived the black experience, you know, Dave Chappelle nor Chris Rock, they weren't born rich. They weren't born famous. They weren't born into any kind of privilege at all. And so they definitely had to come up through the struggle. I guess that gives them a certain perspective that, hey, look, I've been, you know, my people have been fighting for these rights and these equalities and to be recognized. And, you know, we still haven't heard our voice. We still haven't had our voice heard. So I'm thinking that that's their perspective. It's not necessarily mine, but I'm trying to relate here. And I think Dave Chappelle even has a joke in the special where he's criticizing a trans person who says to him, "Would you please stop punching down at us, at my people?"
Yeah.
And he criticizes her for
He even said,
"my people."
He even said, that's what, and Reverend, this is what you would have gotten if you'd have finished the special. He says that bothered him. He says he thought about that more than anything, the phrase punching down. He's like, how can I punch down? Like, he doesn't see himself as this rich, privileged person with all this fame. He sees himself as a black man in America.
And I think that there's a, I'll just close.
Oh, okay.
I'll just close by saying that I think that there is some legitimacy to that, but I would also say that, like I said before, two wrongs don't make a right. One, being a member of a group that's been marginalized shouldn't entitle you to contribute towards the marginalization of another minority group, even if they haven't been marginalized to the extent that you have in your estimation. Probably still not a good idea. And my recommendation for Dave Chappelle, beyond just the financial stuff that you mentioned, David, would be, if you don't want people to view you as transphobic, have a conversation with the trans community. Have a conversation with the.
I just don't think he cares.
I don't think he cares either, because, and this may lose me some viewers, I think he's transphobic. I think when you say I'm team TERF means trans exclusionary, by the way, trans exclusionary radical feminist. But when you embrace that, you're pretty much saying, I have feelings about trans people and they're not, I don't consider them real women. That's pretty much what you're saying. And that's the definition of transphobia. So if he wants to embrace that.
Well, Bryce, I want to ask you this. And I agree with most of what you're saying. He also said in that sentence, whenever he talked about Caitlyn Jenner winning Woman of the Year, he then looked out at the crowd and he said, that means she beat out all you bitches in here.
Yeah.
Do you think he believes every woman in there is a bitch?
No, I don't. I think that he was using that term in a comedic way, which some feminists have issues with the use of that term as well. But I think,
and they have a right to. It's gonna be, you watch, that word is going to be like classified as offensive, and it should be. It's been denigrated. Women are a huge class of people who have been marginalized too, and they still have a huge struggle.
I think comedians, stand-up comedians, have a certain, kind of like what David was alluding to earlier, have a certain entitlement or expectation to be able to say certain things and use certain words where it's deemed less offensive in that particular context. And
he's making good points, though. He is making good points. Like, people are so protective of trans people while the fight is still on for like real equality. Like all these, that's the great thing, is that we're talking about this. And this is coming in the consciousness. And I hope that we all reach out to each other and try to like figure this out. Thing
that's come out of this special. I'm not one of those people who thinks that Dave Chappelle should be canceled or that his show should be canceled. I got accused of that recently when I expressed my opinions that I thought he was transphobic. They were like, well, you're just into cancel culture. No, I don't think he should be canceled. I'm actually glad. I want people to see it. I wanted people to see it because I want to know what other people thought about it, how they interpreted it, whether they thought it was transphobic, if they did, in what way. And it's like you said, we have generated a conversation about it. And I think that could be very helpful to the trans community. I'm trying to look at the silver lining and put aside, he made some statements that may contribute to the harm of the transgender community, but he also got the conversation started. Clearly, he doesn't think he's harming the trans community. He thinks he's rather benign. And I think that there's a conversation to be had there. How do we get to? If
I could just say, I disagree that he's transphobic. I think he's ignorant. I think he's ignorant of the struggles trans men and women have dealt with. And I think that if he were truly transphobic, if he understood what it meant to be trans and were either afraid of them or hated them, I don't think he would have given that comedian that opportunity that he gave her. I don't think he would use her proper pronouns when he spoke about her, because he called her every single time he spoke about her. He was respectful of her pronouns. He gave her an opportunity, and then he blamed the LGBT activist online for her suicide, and he seemed upset by doing so. So he definitely said some things that were harmful. He definitely said some things that were problematic, but he's also a stand-up comedian, and I want to protect that speech. I think he's ignorant more so than he is. I think he's ignorant of the struggles more so than he is anti-trans.
Hopefully people can use this as an opportunity to, if you, I don't know, maybe if you watched the special and you didn't understand why the LGBTQ and trans specifically community was upset, maybe this conversation might shed some light on that. Certainly, I do think that people should, if they are going to express an opinion about it, at least watch it, watch the entire thing, watch it in context, juxtapose what he said about giving this trans person an opportunity when the LGBTQ community wouldn't, against his comments, before you decide whether he's transphobic or not. And I will walk that back a little to agree basically with what David said. I think that the statements he made, there were certain statements that were transphobic. Whether or not he's transphobic, I don't know. I may have to walk that back, because if you're really transphobic, you would, we tend to think you misgender people, you don't like trans people, and he didn't seem to have an issue with that. I think he has more of an issue with transgender women than men as well, and I'm not sure why that's the case, and that might be something to explore.
I think Dave Chappelle is offended. I think as a black man, I think Dave Chappelle is offended that saying something offensive to the LGBT community seems to get a more of an outrage than physically harming black men in America. And I think that pisses him off. And so I don't think it's so much anti-trans as he's going, there's a misdirection of outrage here. I can have an opinion of someone. I can misgender you. I can call you a dude when you're a woman. I can say these things, but there are literally black people being killed in the street, and you're wanting to talk about getting feelings hurt. I think that's where he's coming from. I'm not saying that's my position. I'm saying that it's a valid point to consider. And unfortunately, rather than Dave turning his focus onto the media, who is causing, or at least turning a blind eye to some of this, right? He's instead turning his rage toward the community that's being marginalized themselves. That would be like me having a brother, right? And my mom treating my brother better than me. And rather than me going, hey, Mom, you're not being fair about this, I then start hating my brother for being treated better than me. And I think that's what Dave's doing. Dave is turning toward the community that he sees is getting the type of attention he wishes black folks got in America.
Right. Yeah. And I would maybe say, I hope Dave does this. I don't know if he will or not, but it would be helpful if he came to realize that the most marginalized community, the most marginalized group of people in the United States are trans black women. There's not necessarily a delineation between transgender and African American. You can be both, and some trans people have lived the black experience and were marginalized for that. Oh, and then on top of that, being trans as well. So I don't know, maybe seeing it in that light might get him to recognize what you just said, David.
I want to tell everyone, Flame Monroe is a black trans woman comedian, and she did an interview with Don Lemon that's on YouTube for CNN. Just go type it in, Flame Monroe Don Lemon, and it'll be the first thing that comes up. I really want everyone to go watch that. She has some really, she's very neutral about it and tries to speak to all sides. Being a comedian, understanding that we need that freedom, we need the ability to offend you, but also understanding the black experience and understanding the experience of the discrimination being trans. It's a phenomenal viewpoint, and she could speak to this better than all four of us. Or yeah, I think I would really like people to go watch that.
It sounds
what have you
good.
got? Oh, go ahead, Skids. Sorry.
No, I was just agreeing. That sounds like a really good suggestion for someone to go watch.
What do you have upcoming, David Smalley? Where can we see you next? And what else have you got going on besides the stand-up?
Well, you can text me
There
that.
it is.
You can text me right there. That's the best way. I have to mention my stand-up show on October 23rd. I know you said besides stand-up, but that's my life right now. October 23rd, I'm with Drew Lynch. Do you guys know Drew Lynch from America's Got Talent? He's the comedian that stutters.
Yep.
He is phenomenally funny. He's a great dude. And Mary Lynn Ricecup, who was Gail the Snail on It's Always Funny. It's Always Funny. It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. And she was Chloe on 24 as well. She's going to be there along with a bunch of other funny comedians, really funny comics. DJ Sidekick's going to be there from the Laugh Factory and Chocolate Sundays. Going to have a live DJ. We've got a photographer coming out. It's going to be a crazy fun show, October 23rd at Ha Ha Comedy Club. They can get tickets at davidcsmalley.com. That's it. I'm cranking out podcasts. The best thing anyone can do if you like what I've said today or you don't, you want to support my work, patreon.com/davidcsmalley. That's how I make my living, or text me at this number below, or do both. I'll love you either way.
Awesome. Well, I certainly appreciate you making your second appearance on the show. This was a great discussion. I definitely picked the right person to be here.
Thank you.
And yeah, and we also have links to your YouTube channel and your Facebook and your Twitter in the description of this video. So if you guys want to know more about David C. Smalley or hear more of what he has to say, click on one of those links. And also, I got to thank everybody else, Skids and Reverend Brother Heathen from Faith Not Included. I appreciate you guys joining me and having a conversation about cancel culture with David Smalley.
Absolutely.
So much fun. So much fun.
This was quite lively. And of course, no small thanks to you, and especially you, Reverend Brother. Where would we be without your level of
in a much better place, by the way?
Yes, probably. Yes, agreed.
If you guys have enjoyed this show, please do me a favor and hit the like button. You can catch me here weekdays. Well, not weekdays, weekly. Why do I always say that? I'm definitely not on weekdays. I don't have that kind of time. Weekly, Tuesdays at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Also, don't forget to subscribe to Tang, the Atheist Network group, for more awesome secular content. And for Oz, producer Wes, and Sunny Shell, my name is Brycearonee. Have a good morning, a good afternoon, and a good night. I'll see you next time on The Bryce is Right.